Hello everyone, welcome back to another Genshin Impact video. So, Kokomi's Rerun Banner is now right around the corner, but due to the initial backlash from her initial release, coupled with the fact that she has become much more viable over the past couple patches, has probably left many players wondering whether or not they should actually summon for her. Was she really that bad when she first released? And has she improved enough to make her worth your primos? So today we're going to be breaking down Kokomi's kit and abilities, her best weapons and artifact choices, whether or not her constellations are worth it, and what teams she best fits on. And towards the end of the video, I'll give you my personal thoughts on Kokomi as of 2.5, and whether or not I think that she's worth pulling over other future characters. Because at the end of the day, it's going to depend on what you currently have on your account, and what your personal gameplay preferences are. So let's see if Kokomi's excellent sense of strategy and military prowess will be a good fit for you. And speaking of having an excellent sense of strategy, you're definitely going to need one when playing Raid Shadow Legends, the sponsor of today's video. Raid is currently one of the hottest mobile games available on iOS and Android, boasting intense global PvP, nail-biting PvE boss battles, and over 600 champions to summon, train, and bring into the heat of battle. However, Raid isn't just known for its champions, it's also got an insane variety of bosses too. One being a personal favorite of mine, the Guardian of the Void Keep, Malek Kavar. He used to be a Priest of Light, but has since turned to Darkness. But honestly, I'm pretty glad he did, cause he's kind of rocking the whole Dark Mage look. However, the massive amounts of poison he dishes out is way less fun, especially since he has an ability that deals so much poison damage that it can nuke your whole team if you're not careful. His poison debuffs can't be blocked or resisted either, so you'll definitely need some shield buffs, healing to counteract the damage, or the ability to remove debuffs directly. But if you can get a solid plan together to cleanse his debuffs, then you should be good to go, since he doesn't actually have that many other tools at his disposal. Raid's also got a ton happening this month with a fresh rotation of the Brutal Hydra boss, and a ton of events and tournaments to play every single day, including some special Valentine's events where you can get your hands on a brand new legendary champion. There's honestly no better time to get started in Raid than right now, and if you click my link in the description or scan my QR code here on the screen, you'll get some pretty cool bonuses too. We're talking a free epic champion Tyrell, 200,000 silver, 1 energy refill, 1 EXP boost, and 1 ancient shard, so you can start summoning awesome champions as soon as you get in game. And all of this treasure will be waiting for you right here. So again, thank you Raid Shadow Legends for sponsoring this video. So as I previously mentioned, Kokomi didn't get off to the best start when she first released. In fact, as of recording, she's actually had the single worst sales in Genshin Impact history, meaning that players that already have Kokomi actually have the rarest 5-star in the game. But did she really deserve to have such bad press? Looking back, I can't say that she did. Now, don't get me wrong, even I, when she first released, was a little bit disappointed by her damage numbers, but a lot of players and content creators were really blowing things out of proportion, stating that she's absolute trash, and even going as far to say that if you roll for her, you'd be ruining your account. Even back then, I didn't really agree with this, so I spent a lot of time with Kokomi right after she released, and discovered that while her individual damage might not be that impressive, her true strength lied in her utility. Kokomi is a support first and foremost, and while you can make her your main DPS if you really want her to be, she's always going to fall a little bit short damage-wise compared to her main DPS counterparts. So instead, to get the most use out of Kokomi, it's better to focus on what she's good at, that being healing and enabling with hydro application. These are two things that Kokomi really excels at, so in some situations she even outperforms Xingqiu, Mona, and Child, strictly because she's able to fulfill multiple roles at once without taking up too much field time. I think that a lot of players got wrapped up in the fact that she can't naturally crit, and simply wrote her off as trash, when in actuality she has a lot more to offer. However, in their defense, Kokomi was released without a designated artifact set, so she wasn't really running at max potential. Plus, when she was originally released, the shielding meta was in its heyday, meaning that the grand majority of players weren't really focused on healing, and had no idea that healing would become important in the future. Nowadays, with the addition of corrosion, and enemies that specifically counter shields, Kokomi has found herself being far more valuable in the past few patches. The only question is if she's valuable enough in order to skip other characters coming down the line, but we'll get into that towards the end of the video. For now, I want to do a quick breakdown of her kit so that everyone's on the same page. Starting with Kokomi's auto attacks, these are probably the most underwhelming part about her kit, at least when you're outside of her burst. This is because while they do have excellent range and can apply hydro, and her charge attack actually has some pretty high damage scaling, since they can't crit, they really tap out at a pretty low damage number. So 9 times out of 10, if you're not in her burst mode, which boosts her normal attack damage, you probably don't want to be using her auto attacks at all, unless if you're enabling another character. But does that mean that you can skip over this talent completely and leave it at 0? No, not really. That'd probably be a pretty bad idea. That's because her burst and her auto attacks actually work in tandem, so if your auto attacks aren't leveled up properly, then your burst is going to be underwhelming as well. So while her burst and her skill should get a little bit more priority, party, don't forget to level up her normal and auto attacks whenever you get the chance. Alright, and moving on, let's talk about her elemental skill, which is considered by many Kokomi havers to be one of the best parts of her kit. And I'd have to agree since it does provide so much value. Kokomi's elemental skill summons a jellyfish that not only deals damage and applies hydro at fixed intervals, but also heals any party members that are nearby. So not only is it good at keeping your party alive, but it essentially also functions as an AoE turret that can help you proc multiple elemental reactions, making Kokomi's skill perfect for reverse vaporize, taser, and freeze comps. And while it might not auto-target onto enemies, its AoE radius is actually pretty large, making it really easy to hit multiple enemies at once. And since the skill stays active on the field even when Kokomi switches out, and it has a 12-second duration, it can easily be considered the best AoE off-field hydro application in Genshin Impact. Well, at least as of recording, but even if there was another AoE off-field hydro applicator coming to the game soon, Kokomi's skill would still be considered very valuable since it's dual purpose. Alright, and next up let's talk about her burst. When Kokomi activates her elemental burst, she dons a ceremonial garment that increases her normal attack, charge attack, and her jellyfish damage. This damage increase is based off of her max HP, and additionally, anytime that she hits an enemy with her normal or charged attacks, she'll also heal your entire party, also based off of her max HP. Kokomi is required to stay on the field in order to activate these effects, and her burst will disappear upon switching. So anytime that you're relying on her burst for healing, you need to make sure that you're willing to stay on the field with her. However, to be completely transparent, even during her burst, Kokomi's damage all by herself really can't even begin to compete with other main damage dealers. Because of this, anytime that you do decide to activate her burst, you're going to want to make sure that you have a lot of elemental reactions ready to go. For example, pairing her with a character like Fischl or Beidou in order to deal electro-charged, or enabling something like Xiangling's Pyro Tornado. That way you'll be able to heal your entire team while also dealing a decent amount of damage. However, there's one more piece of utility that her burst provides, and that's thanks to her first passive. Every time that you activate her burst, so long as her jellyfish was already on the field, you'll instantly reset the elemental skill's duration. This means that if you can time everything correctly, you can actually have her elemental skill up at all times, providing never-ending healing and never-ending AoE hydro application. Additionally, thanks to her second passive, whenever you activate her burst, not only will you be increasing your normal and charge attacks by your max HP, but they'll also receive additional damage based off of 15% of her healing bonus, meaning that her burst actually scales off of 2 separate stats, so definitely take that into consideration when farming for her artifacts. Alright, but yes, there is one more passive, and it's probably the main reason why many players considered her to be bad to begin with, because essentially you end up sacrificing 100% of your crit rate in exchange for 25% healing bonus, meaning the only way for Kokomi to crit is for you to get her crit rate well over 100, which in all honesty outside of meme builds is not very reliable. And also being completely transparent, I don't think that this is a fair trade-off at all. I think at the bare minimum, if she's sacrificing 100% of her crit rate, she should have at the very least been getting 50% healing bonus. 25% healing bonus is decent, especially since she does directly scale from it, but it's absolutely nowhere near the value of being able to crit. However, on the flip side, and playing devil's advocate, this means that you don't have to worry about crit rate or crit damage substats at all, making artifact hunting way easier, and it means that her damage will always be consistent. So all in all, while her kit may not actually offer that much in terms of overall damage, it does provide consistency in terms of hydro application, and ensures that your team will always be at full health. But now that we've gone over the entirety of her kit, let's move on to her weapon choices. Starting with her 5-star options, there's really just one, and that's her current best in slot, the Everlasting Moonglow. However, despite this weapon technically being her best in slot in terms of damage, I can't actually recommend pulling for it. Not because it's bad on Kokomi, but rather because it's bad on just about every other unit. Currently, I think the only other character besides Kokomi that can utilize this weapon is Barbara, so especially if you're a light spender or free to play, then definitely don't summon for this weapon, because essentially it'll be good on Kokomi and Barbara, and that's it. Well, at least until they add another HP scaling Catalyst healer to the roster. However, if you do decide to pull for this weapon, it will give you a big HP stat stick, an additional 10% healing bonus, it'll increase your normal attack damage by 1% of your max HP, and for 12 seconds after using her elemental burst, normal attacks that hit enemies will restore 0.6% energy, and this can be triggered every 0.1 seconds, essentially helping with any ER problems so that you can make sure that you maintain her burst. Overall, it is a decent option and her best in slot, but I just don't think that it's worth the price tag, especially since since she has a 4-star craftable weapon that does something very similar, and that being the prototype Amber. While you will miss out on healing bonus, this weapon, like the Everlasting Moonglow, also refunds you energy, and additionally gives you extra healing after using your burst. Now, this extra healing might be a little bit excessive, but it will help you reach your healing quota when trying to activate the passive of the Ocean Hued Clam set, but we'll talk about the artifact sets once we get through the weapons. Overall, the prototype Amber is basically like the 4-star version of the Everlasting Moonglow, and while it might not deal quite as much damage as the Everlasting Moonglow, it still comes pretty close, or at least close enough to give you a reason not to pull on the weapon banner. And while I do think that this is the 4-star that I think most players are going to end up using, you actually do have 2 other 4-star options, one of which being the Hakushin Ring. This weapon is definitely a lot more niche, but if you are running Kokomi in an electrocharge team, then not only will you be giving her extra energy recharge to keep her burst up, but anytime that you trigger an electro reaction, you'll be increasing the elemental damage of both of the elements that reacted by 10%, essentially boosting all of your hydro and electro damage. So while you might end up losing out on your HP stat, this is definitely a viable option if you're running a taser team. And the only other 4-star weapon that I think that people should consider is the Sacrificial Fragments. The Elemental Mastery can actually be a nice boost to her reaction damage, but I think that the biggest selling point is that it can reset your skill cooldown. This can actually be really useful if an enemy moves away from your skill, because if your skill does reset, then you can just adjust where you want your jellyfish. I think this weapon choice is really underrated, so definitely consider it if it fits your playstyle, or if you're not already using it on a character like Sucrose. Okay, and last but not least, there's actually a 3-star weapon that fits Kokomi's playstyle perfectly, and that's the Thrilling Tales of Dragon Slayers. Not only does it have an HP substat, but after being on the field and switching to a new character, you'll give the next character in line a 48% attack boost at R5. This is a ludicrously good option for Kokomi, and it's just about as free-to-play friendly as it comes. Since this is a 3-star weapon from the gacha, it's actually really easy to get to R5, and just about any main DPS or sub DPS that you pair with Kokomi will definitely enjoy the attack boost. So between this option and the other 4-stars, I would say in terms of weapons, Kokomi is by far one of the most free-to-play friendly characters in Genshin Impact. Alright, and moving on to your choices for artifacts, there's basically only 2 sets that are universally agreed on to be her best in slot for endgame content. The first being the 4-piece Tenacity of the Millilith, because the 2-piece set gives you an additional 20% HP, and the 4-piece set makes it so that every time your skill hits an enemy, you'll increase your entire party's attack by 20%. And a little less importantly, unless you're running her with a shielder, it'll also increase your shield strength by 30%. These attack buffs only last for 3 seconds, but since her elemental skill ticks every 1 to 2 seconds, you can essentially keep this buff up at all times. This is really great for a full-on support build, so if you're running her with a separate main damage dealer, this is definitely a good choice. Her second and more recent option is the 4-piece set of the Ocean Hued Clam. The 2-piece set gives you 15% healing bonus, while the 4-piece set gives you, well, a wall of text. Seriously, this thing's a novel, but I'll try my best to break it down easy for you. Essentially, anytime that you heal a party member, any healing and excess healing will be turned into a bubble. This bubble can appear up to every 3 seconds, and when it pops, it takes all of the healing that you've done or would have done if your HP was already full, and turns it into physical damage. Each bubble can only hold up to 30,000 HP worth of healing, and it can deal 90% of this HP as damage. So even simpler, you heal, a bubble forms and pops, and deals physical damage to surrounding enemies, essentially easily giving you over 20,000 damage per pop. This damage can also be affected by Superconduct, as well as physical resistance shred, so if you're healing enough and can debuff your enemy, you can easily hit over 30k. This 4-piece set basically put Kokomi back on the map in terms of damage dealing, because getting an additional 20 to 40,000 damage every 3 seconds is actually pretty massive. It makes it so that having her on the field isn't a complete damage loss. So if you're planning on running her as a main DPS or your driver, then the Ocean Hued Clam is definitely a must farm. Alright, and moving on to Kokomi's Constellations, are they worth it? To be frank and right to the point, no, I don't really think so. Kokomi's Constellations do add to her overall damage and healing output, but I don't think that it's enough to warrant going for Constellations. Or rather, there are other characters that have better Constellations, and it's probably a better use of primos to go for those instead of Kokomi's. However, if you're really dedicated to this character, then by all means go for them, cause like I said, you will be seeing a damage and healing increase the more Constellations you unlock. but let's very quickly break them down so that you know what you're getting into if you decide to summon for them. Her Constellation 1 essentially adds an extra fish to her burst cycle auto attacks that deals 30% of her max HP. This damage is not considered normal attack damage, but it is a nice little bump to her damage during her burst. You can get similar damage output to this if you learn how to auto attack cancel, but for those that don't like animation canceling or don't find it enjoyable, then you'll probably get a lot of value out of this Constellation. C2 increases the amount of healing that you provide your team whenever your party members are under 50% health. I personally think that this is Kokomi's worst Constellation, not because extra healing isn't nice, but rather because Kokomi already heals so much that this doesn't seem necessary. If your Kokomi is already well built, your characters are probably not going to be falling underneath 50% HP anyway, so this is only really nice if you almost accidentally get one shot. So in my personal opinion, not worth it. Constellation 3 is an upgrade to your burst talent, since it does increase your overall healing as well as your total damage output, so decent as far as Constellation 3s go. Constellation 4 is probably her best Constellation in my opinion, because not only does it increase her attack speed during her burst by 10%, but it also makes it so that when you hit an enemy, you'll get 0.8% energy in order to make getting up her burst a little smoother. So while this definitely isn't necessary in order to enjoy Kokomi, it is a little nice for quality of life's sake. Constellation 5 increases her skill talent by 3 levels, which essentially just means more healing and a little bit more damage, and her Constellation 6 makes it so that if you are healing or would be healing a character over 80% HP, then you'll get an additional 40% hydro bonus damage during her burst. This is a pretty easy condition to meet, so basically anytime you get her burst up, you're almost guaranteed 40% extra hydro bonus damage. However, while this is a nice boost to her overall damage output, I don't think that it's actually enough damage to make it worth going all the way to C6, so I personally wouldn't recommend going that far unless you're a diehard fan. So my overall opinion of Kokomi's Constellations is you don't really need them, but they're nice to have if you're a Kokomi connoisseur, which in my opinion makes Kokomi pretty free to play friendly since her Constellations don't make or break her kit. Okay, and now that we've covered her kit, her weapons, her artifacts, and her Constellations, let's discuss her team synergies before moving into the final verdict. If you're pulling for Kokomi, there's probably 2 different ways that you're likely to play her. The first is purely as a support, and the most common team for a support Kokomi is in a freeze comp. This is because Kokomi's consistent off-field Hydro application is extremely valuable since it allows you to keep up to 100% uptime on freeze. And unlike your other options Xingqiu and Mona, who either can't heal at all without the prototype Amber, or heal but not all that much, Kokomi is able to provide consistent big heals, allowing you to consolidate 2 roles into one, therefore allowing you to run much more offensive units in your free spots. For example, slotting in Kokomi allows you to run both Ganyu and Ayaka on the same team if you want to, which is much harder to pull off with other Hydro characters. However, she isn't just limited to freeze comps, because you can always run her as a reverse vape enabler or a driver in a taser team. In a reverse vape comp, her job is basically to make sure that your enemy is constantly affected with Hydro, so your pyro DPS and sub DPS units can consistently reverse vape. And while she's definitely weaker than Mona and Child in this regard, again she's providing multiple positions at once, which can make team building a little bit easier. And as for her taser team, this is probably my favorite comp for Kokomi in general. This is because she pairs so well with Electro sub DPS units, essentially acting as a driver to maximize their electro charge damage. I run this team occasionally in Spiral Abyss, and so long as you have everyone built correctly, it's actually pretty smooth and seamless. So I definitely recommend it if you want Kokomi to be the main character on the field. Also, while a little bit less viable than some of the other options, you can run her in a Superconduct team in order to maximize her bubble damage, but I think that this would only really be worth it if you're already pairing her with a physical DPS such as Eula or Razor, but that option is always there if you want to try it out. However, there is one other meta team that you might have heard of by now, and that being Sukokomon. Essentially, you use Sucrose as your main enabler, and you use Kokomi, Fischl, and Xiangling skills as Pokemon in order to deal multiple reactions at once. Now, there is a very specific order that you need to do in order to make this team work at its max potential, but if you're willing to learn it, it's been proven to be a top tier team. And it's also very free to play accessible since 3 of the characters are 4 stars. And honestly, even outside of these top team builds, if you need a healer for whatever reason, then Kokomi's always going to be a good option. Honestly, in my opinion, she's very similar to Zhongli in this regard, because you can kind of just slot her into any team you want. Okay, and with that, we've finally made it to the final section of the video, so it's finally time to discuss whether or not she's worth pulling for. I think that despite Kokomi getting off to a very shaky start when she first released, that she's consistently become more and more viable as every patch has gone by. Not only did she get a new best in slot artifact set that actually makes her damage viable, but Hoyoverse seems hellbent on making sure that healers come back into the meta by adding more enemies and effects that hard counter shields and greatly favor healers. Obviously, at some point they'll stop this in order to keep things balanced, but it's looking more and more like healers are here to stay. However, keep in mind that there are plenty of healers in the game currently. Just to name a few, we have Jean, Chi-Chi, Diona, Barbara, Noelle, and everyone's favorite unlucky boy, Bennett. So while Kokomi might be a top tier healer, you do have a lot of other options. On top of this, other meta characters such as Ayaka, Kazuha, and even Raiden Shogun, who's being ran at the exact same time as Kokomi, are all top tier units that are directly competing for your primos. So if you don't already have any of these units, then it might be a better idea to go for one of those, since Kokomi can technically be replaced. I do think that Kokomi is the best at what she does, but with primos so limited, it really comes down to what you personally need for your account. My personal recommendation is that if you are currently planning on building a freeze team, and you already have a solid main DPS such as Ayaka or Ganyu, then Kokomi is going to be an absolutely great pickup. Additionally, if you don't have a solid healer, or a character like Zhongli that can tank a lot of damage, then Kokomi will definitely keep you safe and might actually be a boost to your account. However, in just about any other situation, or if you're comfortable and don't need a healer, Kokomi can technically be replaced, meaning you should only really be pulling for her if you actually like her and her kit and what she has to offer, rather than just pulling her just to pull her. So you should quickly take a look at your account and see what you already have going for you, and see if she's going to add any long-time value. But hey, I also understand pulling for characters just because of their aesthetics, because honestly, just look at that backflip. If you still happen to be struggling on a choice between Raiden Shogun and Kokomi specifically, I did recently make a Is Raiden Shogun Worth It video very similar to this one, so I'll make sure to leave a link up above and down below for you guys. But for now, I think that about covers it, so if you did end up enjoying the video, please feel free to leave me a like and comment down below. I'd greatly appreciate it, since it does help me boost into the YouTube algorithm. And if you want to see more Genshin Impact content like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button and click the notification bell. But that's all for now, so until next time, best wishes, bye!